What was the reaction inside your party when this meltdown happened?
This is the 1-2 punch that we just talked about. What do you make of this move?
There is a distinct amount of nervousness pervading Democratic Party discussions right now.
There are 3 big hopes for the GOP that ran out. What are the others?
It's Political Rehab, where PTI meets The Daily Show this week. An alarming Trump temper tantrum, a Senate shout-fest turns ugly for Republicans, a big loss, and a sneaky move in Trump's assault on voting. Democrats, Cold War or Civil War? And in our weekly look at the battleground, 3 of Republicans' biggest hopes collapse in just 1 week. Let's get straight to this week's rundown. Yesterday, Republicans had a stage built in the Capitol, a desk set up, the presidential seal out, and about an hour before Trump was due to walk over and sign the biggest housing bill in 3 decades on the biggest issue for voters, affordability, he killed it on Truth Social. The bill he canceled passed 358-32 in the House and 85-5 in the Senate. He's holding it hostage for a voting bill that doesn't have the votes to pass and isn't really about voting. It's about voter suppression. Matt, Republican leadership had literally scheduled the press conference to brag about this. This is one of their few remaining outs to change the trajectory of the midterm elections. We'll talk more about that in our battleground segment. What was the reaction inside your party when this meltdown happened?
You literally had members of Congress still showing up, not knowing it was canceled. This is a complete and total shit show. But let me tell you what's going on here. Trump has zero interest in governing. The housing bill was part of his State of the Union. He touted this. It was supposed to be that rare legislative victory. Sign the bill, take the victory lap. But there are countless examples of how Trump is just not interested in doing the job of president. There were reports he got bored with the Iran war shortly after he started the war. He cares only about splashy headlines. He cares only about the fundraising opportunities it gives him. The Save America Act is red meat for the MAGA base. It gives him a bridge to talk about stolen elections, and it is a fundraising windfall.
It's also a version of cutting off your trunk to spite your face if you're a Republican. I've been there. I was a congressional chief of staff in 2010 when it was Democrats on the business end of this equation. We were in a midterm election with an unpopular president, with voters believing rightly that their personal economic situation was in peril. They felt angry. And all you can do in that kind of a circumstance is get caught trying. You can't fix everything. But if you have this unified congressional control and White House control, it gives you the chance to at least pass something to show voters that you care, you feel their pain, you're trying to do something to help them. We ended up as Democrats back 16 years ago, basically trying to say, no, everything's fine. It's the meme. All is well, right? Who are you going to believe, us or your lying eyes? That didn't work so well. Republicans had the chance. They'd crossed the finish line. They'd passed the bill. It's something that really addresses a major pain point for Americans. They fumbled it at the goal line, or rather, Trump knocked the ball out of their hands because he's having a temper tantrum. That is deeply disturbing for Republicans, and we'll get much more into this in a few minutes in the battleground segment, but bad sign for your party.
Oh, it hurts. It hurts a lot, and it shows that Trump just wants to fight, which is why he did this right ahead of the Senate lunch. It turned into a political cage match. Donald Trump arrived at the weekly Senate lunch and started yelling about Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, and Rand Paul, the 4 Republicans who voted with Democrats the previous day to limit his war powers. Then he went after McCormick because he wasn't there to vote, and Mitch McConnell because he was in the hospital and couldn't show up and vote. But the most heated exchange came when Trump challenged Cassidy's vote, and Cassidy shot back and started yelling back. It was a screaming match. They each told the others to sit down. Trump called Cassidy a lunatic. Not a stellar day for my party. Matt, anything good here? What can I lay my hopes on?
You can lay your hopes on the fact that I will buy you the next drink the next time we get together. You clearly need it. This is awful. These are the leaders of America. These are the leaders of our government. If you're a voter, you're not appalled by this. What are you doing? And from Trump's standpoint, of course, this is a matter of you reap what you sow, baby. He has gone on the war path against members of his own party, like Bill Cassidy, like John Cornyn, like Lisa Murkowski. He's targeted them. He's belittled them. He's called them losers. He's withdrawn support from them. It couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. This is a consequence of the fact that he's really lost the plot and he cares more about personal retribution. And also, he doesn't fundamentally understand that anyone can be not subservient to him. He only sees other people as supplicants, as working for him. And if they're not, he literally gets baffled.
Yeah, if there is one ray of hope out of this, is finally senators are standing up. They're doing their job, at least in that moment. A little bit too little, too late. But I think the clearer picture here is Trump just doesn't care about the midterms at this point. He knows he's lost. This thing is over, and he'd much rather go after retribution after these guys. You have 5 senators that any given day are just not going to be on his side, and blowing up the whole thing shows that he was more interested in the fight.
Or it's not all about retribution, because there's an alternative theory here, which is he's being sneaky. He is trying to actually make a strategic maneuver. He may have concluded that he has no chance in the midterms the way things are going, so his only opportunity to save himself is to somehow crush the vote. And we saw 2 moves this week that kind of cut in opposing directions when it comes to Trump's ongoing efforts to try to crush people's right to vote. This week, a federal judge in Boston made permanent what had been a year-long temporary block on Trump's executive order requiring proof of citizenship to register to vote, ruling flatly that the Constitution gives that power to states and Congress, not the president. It's the clearest legal defeat yet for his election agenda. Matt, when a judge writes that the Constitution does not grant the president any specific powers over elections, that's about as blunt as a ruling gets, and this question is a trap to you. Does this actually stop Trump, or does he just find a way around it? And the reason it's a trap is we're going to talk about the way he's trying to find around it in our next segment.
Look, we know the answer to this. The way we know this answer is Congress would have passed voter ID. The problem with the Save America Act are not those 2 provisions, but he chose to try this with the executive order because he wanted this headline. He wanted this fight. He wanted to continue to say that the courts are obstructing him. For Trump, the only way he can solve this problem is if he tries to manipulate elections. Look, it's a problem for Republicans because it could be a winning issue that we've turned into a negative issue by the maneuvering, by the shit show that he's going here, because it could have been an easy win. We could have had election integrity that actually seemed like it mattered with voter ID, and we can debate voter ID, but he would have had those votes. But he chose to go this route.
If we go with the theory that this was an intentional move, this whole blow up over the housing bill and his temper tantrum, because he's so hell-bent on getting the Save America Act, it hangs together, right? The Save America Act was intended to be a response essentially to this ruling a year ago that he couldn't accomplish this by executive order, so Congress would have to try to enact it. Make no mistake, this is a scorched earth approach. A 2025 University of Maryland study estimated that 21.3 million eligible American voters, these are Americans, American citizens, wouldn't have access to the kinds of citizenship documents that he would be requiring here, and that would disenfranchise 21 million American voters. It would take away their constitutional rights. When Kansas tried something similar 15 years ago, it blocked over 31,000 eligible citizens from being able to vote before the courts intervened. So this is a blunt force, scorched earth. I don't care if it wipes out some of my MAGA voters, because it'll probably wipe out more of the Democrats' voters, and the Hail Mary move. It's a sign of desperation if this is intentional.
I think it's intentional because you continue to see other pieces of the equation. The other piece is the mail-in ballots, which we saw this week with the postmaster who told senators that the USPS would refuse to deliver mail ballots in states that don't comply with the administration's new requirements. And those requirements include states providing lists of mail voters and ballot barcode information to the Postal Service. Now, this is the 1-2 punch that we just talked about. Matt, what do you make of this move?
It's illegal and constitutional, dirty. It should be appalling to every American who values the Constitution. I don't care if you're a MAGA voter. Take a step back here. What you're saying is the president gets to decide who gets to vote and who doesn't, and gets to manipulate the Postal Service to say, these voters don't get the right to vote, because he's extorting them to be able to get their personal sensitive information about their voting history, their voting patterns, in order to be able to determine. He says, oh, I'm just checking that they're citizens. Shenanigans. Does anyone trust this administration when they get their hands on your personal sensitive information to do something clean and legal with it? Absolutely not. I fully believe that they intend to use this information to figure out from people's voting patterns who tends to vote in favor of Democrats, and to drum them out and make sure that their absentee ballots mysteriously don't arrive. Don't forget, 8 states in our union have mail-in voting only. So all of the voters in those states would potentially lose their ability to vote this November. That's how extreme this is. And somehow, with a straight face, the head of the Postal Service can say, yep, that's the plan. That's what we're doing. It is one of the great outrages that I've seen in an administration that is full of outrages.
To your point, what are those 8 states? A lot of them are Democrat strongholds that by doing it, you're going to restrict. Look,
yes, it's a feature, not a bug, right?
Right, exactly. So the dirty secret here is this is the swampy government that Trump said he was going to stop, is pulling those levers. And now he's trying to use it to stop people from voting. And the sad thing, beyond the outrage you just said, is it's a terrible, dumb fucking idea, because even from the Republican side, this is how we win elections. And so the only reason he's doing this is to try to keep Democrat voters in those states, because you're exactly right, hoping that we're not going to lose enough Republican voters to matter. But it also allows him to go back to his favorite topic, which is stolen election and mail-in ballots, and another fundraising to push. This is all the world according to Donald Trump. And that's why we see this. And that's why we're manipulating elections. And we're going at the most sacred thing of America, which is our ability to vote.
Lest we get accused of Trump derangement syndrome and only focusing on the GOP, we should note that Democrats had their own problems emerge this week after 3 very progressive Democratic socialist candidates prevailed in primary elections in New York. Now, one could take the view that this is a one-off. Zohran Mamdani won in New York City last year, and so this could be idiosyncratic to New York. But the Democratic Party isn't exactly taking it that way. There is a distinct amount of nervousness pervading Democratic Party discussions right now, the sense that the progressive left is in the ascendancy, and this could continue to be a trend that plays out in other primary elections for the remainder of this year, and also be used as a cudgel by Republicans to beat us about the head with the standard charge that we are a bunch of lefty, socialist, woke, you-know-whats. Matt, from the Republican side, as you look ahead at these primary races, what opportunities do you see out ahead? And do you see an overall messaging opportunity emerging from all of this?
Oh, if you watch, and I know you have, so you probably had to turn it off, but if you watch Fox News today, you would have seen this is the single most important issue facing America. It is all they've talked about all morning long. From a political strategist perspective, the mayor backing and replacing incumbent Democrats and reshaping the party. This is a hostile takeover. This is a big deal. It really is. And from Republicans, it gives us that glimmer of hope, that thing that we can hang our hat on, because we will use this to bludgeon every single Democrat that runs. We are going to try and tie it to them. From a political perspective, it probably makes the map a little bit more competitive, but it does give, and from Republican circles, this gives us a welcome glimmer of hope.
I know we're going to get much more into this in our battleground discussion in just a moment. But look, from Democrats' perspective, there's an aspect to this which is like, settle down, people. It's New York City, okay? I'm a native New Yorker. Let me tell you, some Democratic socialists can get pretty far in New York City. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to do the same out in the rest of the country. And indeed, the track record there is decidedly mixed. The part that we're all nervous about is, as much as we all want to be a big tent in the Democratic Party, I'm more of a traditional centrist Democrat myself. The evidence is that more centrist Democrats have roughly a 1 to 2 point advantage in swing districts, in close elections. And that matters when elections in this country have become so razor thin. That makes us nervous, in addition to the overall messaging advantage that it might hand to the Republican parties. That sparring in the Democratic Party is just a piece of the larger war for power in America that's going to play out in the 131 days remaining until the midterm elections. And there were some huge tells of what's to come this week. So let's take a close look at what those were in this week's edition of The Battlefield.
The polls are shifting. The map is changing. The fight for Congress is on. This is the battlefield.
Matt, what's your first major item from the past week that could shift the battlefield?
The big winner this week, Republican ad makers. Their job just got really easy. Make socialism the defining value for Democrats, exploit the Democrats' civil war, and push the extremism. Every ad in every swing district in America will feature Mondami and quotes from one of his wackadoodle socialist friends. Mondami will be the most recognized Democrat in America by the time this is all over. I think there's a bump that's going to happen here for Republicans in tight districts.
When I was working in campaigns, you could see in polling evidence that there was about a 10-point bump in message effectiveness for any Republican message that included the word socialism. Is that charge of socialism still quite as effective as it used to be?
Not as effective as it used to. It's been normalized. You look at AOC's election, you look at Bernie Sanders. We've beat that drum for so long. It doesn't have the same impact as it always has. And let's face it, we've tried this kind of messaging for a long time with limited success against Pelosi. Where I do think this matters and where I do think it made the map a little bit harder for Democrats is in races like Mike Lawler's race, where a seat where Democrats need to win. It is a D+1 district, and it makes it more competitive.
You alluded to the story earlier. You were looking at the news on Fox News, and you were just getting a repeat of the socialism message. And from a Democrat standpoint, I can say, yeah, that's par for the course. It feels a little bit like a desperation move, because when you don't have anything better to say to help you, you play the hits. Do you see that the same way?
That's exactly what we're doing right now with Fox News. And you see it on Newsmax as well. It is just beating that drum.
The idea that socialism has overtaken all Democrats is patently ridiculous, comrade. So what's your next story?
Here's something I'm putting on my radar. It's Ohio. Fundraising reports just came out this week, and the Democrat running for governor outraised Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, look, I know the people on Vivek's campaign, they are top notch. They are really good. And that's not what worries me. Fundraising can sometimes be a momentum shift. Vivek has more money. He put in $25 million. Early in this race, he's already been spending. He's been driving the ads. But the fact that the Democrat could pick up more could be a subtle sign that things are not looking good in Ohio right now.
Right. It could be a proxy for enthusiasm. We do have some other pieces of evidence in polling that shows that Democrats' grassroots enthusiasm to vote in the upcoming elections is higher than Republicans, and also turnout in special elections, where we've seen an increase in turnout among Democrats of 5.6 percentage points. Do you see that the same way, that this is really a proxy for enthusiasm?
It is a proxy for enthusiasm. People start to feel that momentum, so they start to give. And it's not just the governor's race. There's a couple other down ballot races. 2 of the 4 other races, Democrats outraised Republicans. Again, I want to be clear. Republicans have more money. They're not in trouble. But this is one of those early indications that, as a strategist, I look at, because where the money flows and who is gaining that momentum.
So you had the Ohio story as something you're watching. You had Republican ad makers as your winner. Who's your loser this week?
Congressional Republicans are by far the biggest loser of the week. Look, it's not just Trump doing Trump things. blowing up the legislative priorities, canceling the signing of the housing bill, and demanding the Save America Act tells me a lot. It tells me he knows the midterms are going to be a bloodbath. Otherwise, you sign the bill and take the victory lap. Like right now, it looks like Trump is just sabotaging the GOP.
When I wrote this up on my Substack, worthknowing.substack.com, for anyone who wants a lot more analysis in there, I said that there are basically only two possibilities for explaining what Trump did this week. One is it was intentional. I got into that in the rundown. Maybe this is like a last ditch maneuver to really push the Save America Act because it's his only chance of saving Republicans in the midterms. The other possibility is he's just lost the plot. He literally no longer has a sense of what is in his best political interests and what isn't. And he's just giving himself over to his unrestrained id in this temper tantrum. And my question to Republicans is, which one is worse? Matt, which one's worse?
Can I just say, stick a needle in my eye and poke my eye out? They're both horrible options. How does this all stack up on the dashboard?
In terms of the big structural indicators that we always look at, Trump approval rating, the generic ballot, and consumer sentiment, very small movement this week. The really significant piece of this that I want to point to, besides the fact that Charlie Cook, the congressional race raider, moved 7 races in Democrats' direction, which is interesting, but it's not a major indicator because most of those races are reaches for Democrats. They're more possible, but they really only matter if we have a major Democratic wave. The big thing to look at that I included this week is gas prices. And you can see there's a disconnect happening here between the major decrease in gas prices that we've seen not only week on week, but also over the last month, and the fact that Trump's approval rating is going in the wrong direction.
I saw that this morning when you sent it out. What does the gas price element tell you? Because last week you said it was something to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to give a little preview of something that's actually behind a paywall on my Substack right now, but our YouTube viewers get to see it. This is a little chart that I put together here showing Trump's approval rating, which is the blue line, his disapproval rating, which is the orange line, and gas prices, which you can see with that yellow arrow really started to spike at the start of the war with Iran. What's really interesting in here is there's no relationship at all between Trump's approval and this massive price spike in gasoline. And as the prices at the pump have started to recover, Trump isn't getting any political benefit. So what I said last week is that this is a major sign to watch for. This is one of the few things that Republicans were banking on as an out, as you'd say in poker terms. As gas prices start to come down, voters, because of their recency bias and their short-term memories, will feel like, things are getting better from the absolute beating we were taking before. And that'll make me feel better economically. And that'll get reflected in the president's approval rating and Republicans' prospects. We are not seeing that happening. And with this much of a decrease in gas prices having no relationship to Trump's approval, it sure looks like voters' impressions are baked in at this point, and we're not going to see any relief for Republicans up ahead.
Now, you said in your Substack that there were 3 big hopes for the GOP that ran out. What are the others?
The gas price straw to grasp at, that was the first one. We covered in the rundown the housing debacle, the idea that this is something Republicans could have done on affordability, which is voters' number one issue. They had a clean shot. They even had it across the goal line, and Trump knocked it out of their hands like BB at the goal line for the Bills. But the other sneaky one this week was a piece of polling that emerged showing that Americans are truly not buying what Republicans are selling on their go-to move of sprinkling tax cut fairy dust over voters as they head into the voting booth. Look, man, you know this move. You've done this move. Anytime you need a little lift electorally, Republicans say, time for a tax cut. That's what they tried with the One Big Beautiful Bill last year, except it landed like a lead balloon. You could see it in internal polling from the Republicans. They had to beg congressional leadership. The White House had to beg them, stop calling it the One Big Beautiful Bill. Call it the Middle Class Tax Relief Act. But voters didn't buy that either. And you can see on the dashboard this week that the polling that emerged is that 63% of Americans say that Trump's policies have helped the wealthy and big corporations. Only 8% say that they're helping average Americans. That is a big deal because it really removes from the board that one of the few remaining levers that Republicans had to try and turn that economic narrative around and to try to reverse their approval rating slide.
All right, so you've looked at all this stuff, you've read all this stuff, so everybody else who's watching this doesn't have to. What's your big takeaway this week? Where do you put the state of the battlefield?
The state of the battlefield is reasonably steady, but trending more toward the Democrats than the Republicans. Between your big stories and my big stories, what you're seeing is chaos, which voters don't like. Some of Republicans' biggest levers to try to pull, to try to affect the midterm elections, receding out of their grasp. And even though you're seeing a little bit of a drawback on the generic ballot for Democrats, they're not quite as strong as they looked a few weeks ago. I think that's mostly because of some technicalities with how polling averages are put together. I'm not putting a lot of stock in that. I'm expecting that's going to reverse as we get further and further toward the midterm elections. So this last week was a move toward the Democrats. And look, I got to say that from my standpoint, that's a hopeful sign. But that's not necessarily hopeful for everyone else. So let's touch on some things that are hopeful for everyone else in this week's Dose of Hope.
This week, America begins celebrating its 250th birthday. It kicked off with the president hosting a rally on the National Mall in Washington. Cabinet members spoke. There were military flyovers, military bands. Lee Greenwood saying, "God bless the USA." Across the country, there'll be concerts, block parties, reading of the Declaration of Independence and fireworks. And also, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are probably getting married. Now, look, I know for a lot of people, Donald Trump made America's 250th birthday party controversial before the candles were even lit. And we all laughed at the stories of artists dropping out from the Great American Fair, and Trump's makeover of DC resulted in him creating an actual swamp in the reflecting pool. But let's step back and remember what we're celebrating. By the summer of 1776, Americans had already been at war with Great Britain for more than a year. In early June, Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution declaring that the colonies ought to be free and independent states. Congress knew that if it took that step, it would have to explain itself, not just to the American people, but to the rest of the world. Thomas Jefferson drafted the first draft. And over the next several weeks, Congress debated it, edited it, and revised it line by line. Then came the week that changed America. On July 2nd, Congress voted for independence. That was the decision that severed America's political ties to Great Britain. 2 days later, July 4th, Congress approved the final text of the Declaration of Independence and dated it July 4th. A few days later, on July 8th, the Declaration was read publicly for the first time. Ordinary Americans gathered to hear the words that would define their new country. And what they heard changed the course of history. We would be free people. We would govern ourselves. Government existed to serve the people. That's what we're celebrating. Don't get lost in Trump's reality show. Don't get lost in the division. Don't get lost in the chaos of the moment. This week belongs to America. 250 years ago, the torch of liberty was lit in Philadelphia. It illuminated the path for generations of Americans and for freedom-seeking people around the world. So while you're at a barbecue, a parade, or watching fireworks with your family, I have one request. Let's do more than just celebrate our freedom. Let's renew our commitment to it.
I couldn't agree more, Matt, because in a week where the news stories were about Washington descending into a swamp, congressional logjams and Trump temper tantrums and insidious voter suppression and Democrats with knives out for each other, not to mention, as you mentioned, the literal swamp that Trump created in the reflecting pool, it was really refreshing to get a clear dose of hope out of podcaster and author Derek Thompson, titled The Most Exciting Month of Medical Breakthroughs in Years. You like that title? I sure do. Let me give you the TLDR. A new drug is promising a breakthrough in the treatment of one of the deadliest cancers on Earth, pancreatic cancer. The medicine nearly doubled overall survival, and just as important, it targets a specific gene mutation in a way that could be built on and extended in the future. In other news, there's a new GLP-1 drug that builds on the incredible success of medicines like Ozempic and Wegovy and goes even further because it hits 3 separate hormone receptors. So it has the delightful nickname Triple G, and it's looking like the most potent medicine yet. And here's the best part. It's not even really for weight loss. The new drug is showing incredible promise in reducing heart attacks and strokes. We're now seeing hard data suggesting that we could reduce the impact of two of America's biggest killers. Oh, and for those of us to whom this applies, it also seems to help treat knee pain. Awesome. And the third one might be the craziest, a heart disease treatment based on gene editing that could be a one and done injection. Like, forget the statins, just get one jab, fix your genes, and say goodbye to clogged arteries. If this is the first you're hearing of all this, it says something about the way our news cycle works these days. We get all the muck and mire, all the gunk and ire, but underneath it, there's a subterranean stream of pure progress. And this week, it's sprung to the surface, and that's a great reason for hope. And on that note, for Matt, I'm Matt. We'll see you next time.